It's a yearly review for Illinois State University, and as Taylor Fleming learned during ISU's State of the University address, there are some mixed grades on that report card. She joins us from Normal with more.
When it comes to the state of Illinois State University, there's some good and some bad news. The good news, increased enrollment and progress on various construction projects. The bad news, a wage freeze for staff. The 21st president of ISU, Ondove Tarhule, said that the university needs to cut expenses so they won't be increasing wages this year.
Next year, on the general revenue, which is the one that funds most salaries, we are going to be in a deficit if we do nothing. So what we're trying to do is to estimate what do we need to do to avoid that deficit.
On the rest of campus, art classroom renovations were completed in January, and a new nursing simulation center recently opened. Tarhule has been advocating for federal funding for a new STEM building. He hopes construction on that project could begin next fall. Despite the continued increasing enrollment, efforts to add more housing on campus have stalled.
The project was put on hold during COVID. Since then, significant increases in construction costs have made it impossible for Illinois State to move forward with our original plans.
He said that the school is seeing more enrollment with an almost 3% increase over last year. 34% of those students come from underrepresented groups. A moment of tension arose when pro-Palestine protesters stood at the front of the stage for a large portion of the speech. After the address, Tarhule heard two questions from the audience. Students challenged Tarhule on his handling of staff contract negotiations and campus protests when it came to the war in Gaza. This was Tarhule's second time behind the podium, but first as a fully fledged president. He was installed as president earlier this year, having previously served as university provost and vice president of academic affairs. In Normal, Taylor Fleming, 25 News.